Welcome back, dear viewers. Today, we explore the frozen grave, shattered by a mighty king's arrogance. Imagine the greatest army in Europe, reduced to starving, freezing ghosts, begging for a sudden end. This was the brutal fate of Sweden's best forces. Their proud king, Charles XII, had never lost a battle. Blinded by endless victories, he marched into the freezing Russian heartland, hunting Peter the Great. But the Russian Tsar refused to fight with swords. He weaponized the winter, turning nature into a trap. In the early 18th century, the Swedish Empire was an unmatched titan, ruling the frozen north. At the helm of this massive war machine stood a very young and aggressive ruler, King Charles XII. Taking the throne as a mere teenager, Charles quickly proved himself to be a military genius. He swiftly crushed the Russian coalition at Narva with just a tiny fraction of his brave men. Known as the Caroleans, they were deadly shock infantry, trained to fight without any trace of fear. They utilized an aggressive tactic, marching directly into heavy fire without flinching once. They would hold their muskets tight, wait until they saw the enemy eyes, and deliver a deadly strike. After shattering the enemy lines, they charged with cold bayonets, bringing a devastating end. By the summer of 1708, King Charles brought half of Europe down to its bleeding knees. But this unbroken streak of victories planted a dark, venomous poison seed in his proud mind. He began to believe his own myth. He thought his Swedish army was invincible, chosen by God. Instead of securing a peace treaty, Charles set his hungry eyes on the impossible global prize. He wanted to march directly to Moscow, burn the Russian capital down, and depose Tsar Peter. Generals begged him to stop, warning him about the sheer, terrifying size of the huge Russian lands. But arrogance makes men deaf to reason. Charles declared he would dictate peace terms from Moscow's ancient walls. And so, the Golden Lion of the North led 40,000 elite soldiers east into the unknown dark. They marched with gleaming bayonets and coats. Completely unaware, they walked into a silent graveyard. As the Swedish forces crossed the borders, they expected a swift campaign, crushing all in their path. However, they faced no ordinary king. They were facing Peter the Great, a ruthless mastermind. Peter knew his army could not defeat the trained Caroleans in a direct, open field of strength. He studied Charles, recognizing that the young king was addicted to quick, brutal, crucial victories. To defeat an aggressive lion, you do not fight it head-on. You slowly starve it of all its strength. The cunning Tsar ordered a massive retreat. His forces melted into the endless forests like silent phantoms. When the Swedes advanced, ready to fight, they found nothing but barren fields and a chilling, deadly silence. Charles pushed his men harder, desperate to force a major confrontation, marching deep into the vast trap. The supply line stretched dangerously thin. The once mighty Swedish network began to slowly crumble. They were thousands of miles away from home, surrounded by a deadly landscape offering no shelter. The stage was set for one of the most agonizing, slow-motion military disasters recorded. As autumn turned to winter, Peter unleashed his most devastating weapon, the Scorched Earth policy. Russian soldiers systematically burned every village, barn, and wheat field along their path. They poisoned the wells with animal corpses and destroyed any vital resource to feed the enemy. When the exhausted Swedes arrived at a town, they found nothing but smoking black ash and pure desolation. Then, nature itself turned against the Swedes. The winter of 1708 was the coldest recorded. Historians call it the Great Frost. Temperatures dropped so incredibly low that the Baltic froze. Eyewitness accounts claim that birds simply froze in mid-flight, dropping out of the sky like solid little stones. For marching Swedish soldiers lacking gear, this extreme and brutal weather was a slow, agonizing end. Their blue coats were reduced to filthy rags, caked in frozen mud, dried dark blood, and heavy winter snow. They wrapped in scavenged furs and dirty strips, shivering violently as the wind bit their freezing skin. Frostbite claimed heavy tolls. Fingers turned black and fell off, while tears instantly froze upon their dirty cheeks. Is it cowardice to burn your own land to ashes, or is it a brilliant stroke of tactical mind? While Swedes perished in the darkness every night, Peter's troops remained warm and fully fed in hidden camps. Food rations disappeared. The starving troops were forced to sacrifice their dying horses just to survive. Reports state they ground up the frozen bark, trying to bake a bitter, cruel bread just to stay alive. Watching this total bitter misery, Charles refused to yield. His great blind pride chained him to a doomed path. He rode among his dying, starving men, his face a chilling mask of total pride, waiting for miracles. Out of 40,000 elite brave men, nearly half perished in the deep white snow, without a single shot. This was a mental masterclass by the Tsar, destroying the enemy's broken soul before the battle. Charles still possessed his strong core veterans, survivors who clung to life with a dark, grim ferocity. By the spring of 1709, the winter retreated, transforming the land into a sea of mud. The remnants of the Swedish army limped toward the fortress of Poltava, hoping to find supplies. But Poltava was heavily fortified and defended by a brave garrison, sworn to hold their ground. Charles ordered a siege, but lacked cannons. His men had to dig weary, deep trenches in the rotting black mud. The whole siege quickly turned into a dark, grim hell, when King Charles took a severe, crippling bodily wound. During a skirmish, a stray Russian lead ball smashed directly into his left foot, shattering the bone. Fever set in, and the wound festered deeply. The invincible warrior king was now stuck to his bed. This was the moment Tsar Peter waited for. He marched his massive, rested troops down toward Poltava. Peter commanded 80,000 brave men, outnumbering the broken Swedish troops by 2 to 1. But instead of an immediate attack, the Tsar built a terrifying death trap on the muddy field. He ordered the construction of a system of 10 earthwork redoubts, arranged in a deadly T-shape format. These forts were packed with heavy artillery and hundreds of musketeers, creating a corridor of doom. Any advancing army would be funneled between the redoubts, subjected to a deadly crossfire rain. Despite his agonizing fever and pain, King Charles remained stubbornly obsessed with his attack tactics. He refused to retreat, ordering his men to launch a desperate, tragic strike on the Russian defense. As the dawn broke on June 28th, the Swedes began their silent, tragic march into the morning mist. King Charles, unable to walk, was carried into the heart of the battle on a rough wooden litter bed. The Caroleans charged with drawn swords and blades, hoping to overwhelm the muddy forts with their famous shock speed. The Tsar's trap was a perfectly aligned hell. When Swedes stepped into the corridor zone, the guns loudly roared. Iron balls tore through the packed Swedish ranks, violently tearing away life, shattering all their hope. The battle turned into a deadly ruin. Thick, choking black smoke from the artillery hid the grim chaos. Would you charge into a cannon fire rain only because a crippled, arrogant king gave the dark order? The Swedish lines shattered and split in two. Orders failed and utterly broke down amid the roar of the guns. Panic, a fear the Caroleans never knew, spread like a deadly wildfire deep in the rotting mud. The king's litter was struck by sharp shrapnel, throwing the wounded monarch hard into the brutal chaos. For a horrifying, dark moment, the Swedish soldiers thought their mighty king had instantly perished. But Charles was dragged from the muddy dirt, screaming in absolute agony, waving his shattered sword. Seeing their king broken in the thick mud finally snapped their strong morale. The mighty army broke. Meanwhile, Tsar Peter sat on his horse, calmly watching the enemy disintegrate before him. He ordered his fresh, well-fed infantry to march out from the deep forts and deliver the final blow. A Russian wave swept across the dark field, like a brutal tidal wave of green, crushing the weary bluecoats. The Battle of Poltava was over in just a few terrifying hours. The ruin was total. 10,000 brave Swedes fell on the ground, on the tragic, dark, muddy field, in the bitter, melting snow. Thousands more were taken as prisoners by the victorious Russian troops, doomed to hard, freezing labor. Charles, the proud lion who swore to rule, was now a broken, terrified ghost, fleeing from the Russian wrath. He left his fallen men in the mud, fled to the Ottoman Empire, seeking a dark, hidden place. As the sun set on the cold, muddy fields, a deep silence fell over the land. Upon the Swedish lost, the pride of the mighty Swedish king died in the bitter, deadly snow, broken and lost until the end. Tsar Peter achieved the unthinkable. He did not just win a battle, he secured his empire's fate. From the dark ashes of Poltava, the Russian Empire quickly rose to be a dominant power. They controlled the Baltic Sea for years and influenced European states, ending the Swedish dominance. Charles spent years in a bitter exile, scheming to build a brand new force and return to his stolen throne. He went back to his homeland, to die by a sudden, fatal, dark shot in a meaningless, empty siege. Historians still fiercely debate if Charles was a bold tactician or an arrogant, blind madman. The undeniable truth is clear. His deadly pride led to the fall of his invincible, brave men. Poltava is a grim, dark warning to any arrogant, proud king who dares to beat Mother Nature. It is a monument to blind pride, a frozen grave where a mighty golden empire died in the mud. The Swedish king believed he was a god, but the Tsar proved that a clever mind can beat pure, raw strength. The Caroleans rest in the mud, a dark, tragic end to an era of supreme Swedish power. Their coats were buried under the drifting snow, forgotten by the proud king who led them to a freezing hell. In his frantic escape to the distant south, King Charles XII lost it all, leaving his empire behind. This was not just a military defeat. It was a complete destruction of the Swedish soul. Russia rose from the muddy battlefields as an imperial beast ready to dominate the stage. The Tsar modernized his expanding realm, building grand cities over the bitter bones of his lost foes. History remembers Peter the Great as a visionary leader who shaped the modern whole world. But history also remembers well the dark cost of his victory in the brutal winter freeze. Nature does not care about golden crowns, shining weapons, or the arrogant ambition of a man. In the end, the frozen mud claimed them all, leaving an eternal warning to the future proud warlords. The battlefield of Poltava echoes with the ghostly cries of the lost Caroleans in the wind. A testament to a broken empire It stands as a grim reminder of how fast power vanishes. The Russian winter broke the mighty king. But let us look back deep at the ancient Roman time of war. Another brilliant commander used giant beasts with trunks to shatter the mighty Roman defense lines. He crossed the freezing, snowy Alps with monsters, striking a deadly, pure fear into the ancient Roman core. The legend of Hannibal Barca awaits in the next chapter of our epic, thrilling, historic tale. Poltava stands as a dark reminder that nature is the true conqueror, and pride ruins empires. Was Charles a fearless tactical genius, or a proud, blind fool who doomed his brave men to a frozen ending? If you enjoyed this journey to the past, please like, share, and subscribe for more epic, thrilling stories.